Well, hello again. And I think it's just you and I again. I'm gonna give it a minute here and see if anybody else joins. Some weeks we have like 15 people in the class, some weeks we just have one or two. I
Yeah, I've
change.
been trying to get into these more, but for a few weeks, and just one thing or another comes and conflicts. And
Yeah.
so this week, still had a conflict. There's a president's meeting for my company, and I'm like, you know what? I can't put this off any longer. Last week it was the conference, and yeah, just one thing after another.
Yeah, I get that.
It
Okay.
is pretty intuitive as far as figuring stuff out, but it's still complex enough that training is very beneficial.
Right, right. Well, I'm not sure what page I'm sharing here, so let me reshare. Okay, now I think we're good. All right. Yeah, you're right. Especially if like you're kind of new. I mean, I'm not assuming you are, but we have some clients that are very new to like managing cybersecurity, anything. And
Yeah.
so for them, tools like this, even though they're kind of intuitive, they're still understanding of like what you need to do, and how best to do it in the tool. All right, so as I said, we're just gonna talk about the rest of the tool, but let me open up so I can see if anybody joins. Okay. Okay, so conducting internal and external assessments. Well, the assess area here is really it's where you're going to document all internal assessment activity. And it's going to help you drive your external assessments. External assessors, as you saw, we do have the assessor role. So
Mm.
there has been some C3PAO assessors out there who want to get access to future feeds to the people's future feed environment because it lays out nicely all the information and all the evidence that they want to see in their assessment. That's read-only access. So they're
Mhm.
not gonna, I'm sure you know this, but they're not gonna be like changing your status results in here, and they're not gonna document that C3PAO assessment results in future feed. But that you would use it essentially before you go into that assessment, you want this page right here 100% accurate. You want all the statuses accurate. You want all the implementation narratives accurate, and you want all your evidence in here so that way your assessment process um, speeds up. It's a lot smoother of assessment.
Yeah.
Um, we'll just talk about doing internal assessments and kind of like how I would use FutureFeed to do it. Um, so you just start by going through all the controls. Now, when I do an assessment, hold on, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. When I do an assessment, there's some control families that I like to evaluate together. Like I usually do AC and IA together
Hmm.
because the same people are responsible for those requirements and the same tools like Active Directory,
Hmm.
pretty heavy here, and same in IA. Um, you know, Personnel security and training are usually done together because it's typically the same people, HR doing the training as well as doing the background checks and the onboarding and offboarding. So you'll kind of like figure out what control families are similar, and you might want to assess them together. But anyway, you just want to make sure you have assessment results and a status for all of the 110 controls. Um, so we'll do this 318 control because I think I've built out some stuff in here. So I just always start by reading the requirement.
Hmm.
And more importantly, always evaluate at the objective level, which is how we designed FutureFeed anyway. And that's because during an assessment, if you fail one of the objectives, you fail the overall
Hmm.
control. There's an exception. There's two exceptions there where like partial credit is given in like, I think it's the MFA control and the FIPS validated encryption
Hmm.
control. But anyway, when your environment probably says unknown, or your client's environments will say unknown. So read the objective. And since everything's blank at this point, you're going to spend a little bit more time populating FutureFeed. Of course, you have to provide an objective statement. This is where you're defining specifically how that objective is implemented.
Hmm.
As you see here, the means of limiting unsuccessful login attempts is defined in, this is what happens when I do things on the fly, as 5 attempts within 15 minutes, and it's defined in the access control policy. I wouldn't do this. This was a result from another training. You can document the objectives this way. I would personally always have one source of truth when it comes to defining something or
Yeah,
document.
just defined in the access control policy. That way,
Okay, yeah, you're
if you
good.
change it later, you don't have to change it here as well. Yep.
Yes. Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I was getting at.
Hmm.
Going to prevent future issues when changes are made. So personally, I would do it this way. Um, but all right, so when you call out a document, when you call out a procedure, a process, a form, any sort of documentation, you're going to want to make sure that you collect that documentation and
Yeah.
you log it in the documents section and that it's associated down below in the examine area. Okay, so it's going to be you can quickly get to it for an assessment. Um, so back to this one. Um, So if you're, and then you also want to capture who you're talking to, who you're interviewing, and who's responsible for this definition. And that's who you would put down here under the interview section under RACI. These
Hmm.
are the people that you would interview every year. There's an annual security control assessment requirement. So every year you should be doing a assessment, an internal assessment. And then these are also the people that the C3 PAO assessors would interview. Um, so you'd spend a little extra time developing out that statement, collecting the evidence, and tagging the people responsible. Um, and as soon as you mark things, oh, someone's joining us. Hello, welcome. Hmm. This still says they're joining. They must be having connectivity issues. All right. And I'm sure you know this, but hi, welcome, Russell. Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hi. So you're coming in a little bit late, but no worries because this session is being recorded. So after we end the call today, you should get a link to the recording and you can rewatch the first portion in that recording.
Great.
We're
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're talking about the assess area future feed and how to document internal assessment results and how to build out your assess area future feed. All right. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have seen this, but right now, next to the objective A, there's just a plus sign here. This is where you can create a poem quickly. As soon as you mark something not met in future feed, it's going to create that first poem for you. So now it says number 1, we have one poem open for this item. Whenever you make a poem or whenever you mark something not met, you're going to want to make it a point to open it up. modify the poem description. This is where you want to clearly say, what failed, what was the issue, and what needs to be fixed. And then make sure you definitely assign it to someone. At least one of these objectives should be assigned. If you have that default accountable role set, then the accountable person would already be set, but you're going to want to make sure you set someone as responsible. Who needs to do that? Who needs to do the work to close out that poem item? And set a due date. Of course, you see there's a default due date populated. You can change it and determine impact, effort, and cost if you know that. So whenever you make a poem in FutureFeed, you want to open it up and modify everything. It's all templated right now, but you want to be as detailed as possible so that way the people who have to actually do the work know what they got to do. So when I was writing poems, I got very detailed, like step 1, let's say it's a document. Update the document to include this definition. Step 2, route that document to someone to get it approved. Step 3, provide that document to this person so they can upload it into FutureFeed. Step 4, close out the poem. So the more detailed you can get, the better. So when you mark things not met, it creates the first poem for you. You can create additional poems. And some people like doing this because, as I just said in that example, like step 1, maybe someone, developing that document. And step 2, who needs to approve that document? Maybe someone else. And so you might want to break out those steps or the milestones into separate poems so that way you can get them assigned to the right person. To create another poem, you just hit poem and add new poem. Why are you creating the poem? Hit save. Now there's 2 poems created for this one objective. And if I click on it, here's my first poem up top, scroll down, there's my second poem. You can mark poems complete from here as well. Just hit complete. It asks you, what was done, what was the remediation, what was the fix, why are you closing it out, mark it complete. When it comes to evidence though, okay, so here we're saying that something is defined in the access control policy. So I want to get a hold of that access control policy. If I don't already have it, I need to see that document and I need to upload it into FutureFeed. So it's up to you whether you want to create a poem for that or not. Sometimes people just take, especially in consulting, if you're working with clients, I often would ask the client a question and say, they'd be like, yeah, we do that. And then okay, now give me evidence that you're doing that. The evidence they would provide me, they weren't doing what they said they were doing, so it was actually a failure. So it's up to you if you want to, I don't want to say blindly trust people's answers because that sounds rude, but there's the whole trust but verify thing in the world of compliance. And especially with CMMC, take their word for it, but always get that evidence. And so it's up to you. You can mark something met and still have a poem. If you want to say, okay, the IT department, whoever I'm interviewing, they said they have an access control policy. They said it does have this definition into it. I'm going to mark it met, but I'm going to still create a poem here because I want them to please provide the latest approved access control policy. Like you can create poem items related to collecting evidence. Me personally, though, if I don't have the evidence, I didn't mark things as met. I would keep them in an unknown state and still create a poem, or even I would mark it as not met and create a poem. It's up to you and how your company wants to handle that. So the next objective here, the defined means of limiting unsuccessful logon attempts is implemented. So this is typically especially this one is a technical requirement. So here you're typically want to see screenshots or some configuration setting reports. So here's how I would write this one up. And I like this response here because I want to talk to you about some failures that I've seen. I'm an assessor, Russell, if I mentioned that earlier in the meeting, but I am a CCA and CCP, and I've done some assessments. And so a common failure for companies is in their system security plan, you have to define the method of implementation in your SSP. You have to define how your requirements are implemented in your SSP. And often companies would only put one statement in there and they would forget about some of the other assets they have in scope. So all I'm trying to show you here is that make sure you have an implementation narrative for all the different ways that requirement is implemented. Make sure you're addressing how that control is implemented on all the assets that you have within your assessment scope boundary. So here we're saying Windows, well, this limit of unsuccessful logon attempts, it's being implemented on my Windows boxes by Entra ID in a policy that Entra ID is pushing out. But I have a on-prem firewall that doesn't pick up my Active Directory or Entra ID policies, my domain policies. So, but it has logon ability. You know, my firewall system administrators, they have to frequently log into the management console of the firewall and configure the firewall. There's login capability there. There's username and password capability or MFA. So, um, how is that system implementing a limit of unsuccessful logon attempts? So make sure you define that. If it's different, if everything's implemented the same way, then one statement is sufficient. But do factor in your assessment scope and all the different asset types, and then make sure you address how the requirements are implemented on the different asset types if the implementation is different. Another good thing I see, another common thing I saw is when it comes to the applications, any major applications that are storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, is people would forget to address the applications. And so make sure you address those as well. Especially, for those applications that have a backend database and they have logging capability, all of that stuff. So here in this example, I'm also saying that I have some inheritance. Okay, so I'm saying my Entra ID is managed by an external service provider, and they're the ones responsible for configuring and maintaining Entra ID. So whenever you say you have some external service provider involvement or inheritance, then, oops, sorry, over here, this teardrop is how you document inheritance. So make sure your statement calls out that inheritance, but then also go over here into the teardrop and mark it inherited. So in that situation, I said Windows boxes are being managed by an external service provider. My on-prem, though, firewall is solely my company's responsible for maintaining. So this objective B, it's not fully inherited because not everything is being covered or implemented by an external service provider. It's partially inherited because there's external responsibility, but also internal responsibility. So this would be a partially inherited objective. That's what partially inherited means when there's shared responsibility. And what happens, I'll do it up on this one. So if I mark this one as partially inherited, a yellow triangle pops up. What that's trying to say is, hey, you just said something is inherited. please tell me who's doing that work. Who are you inheriting from? And so you would click on that little triangle and it will list out all of your shared responsibility matrices or your CRMs. Pretty soon in the future, this is going to say CRM instead of SRM, but it will list all your SRMs and your CRMs out that you've created in the system under the documents section, and you would associate the inheritance. So I had Prevail inheritance and Windows inheritance by these providers. Okay. So now when an assessor, if they ever want to get into FutureFeed, or definitely during your C3PO assessment, you would have FutureFeed up, display it in the room with the assessors, and navigate through the controls as they are moving through them. So you can refer to this information when you're getting interviewed. You can see how you've addressed it before, and you can quickly, okay, objective B, yeah, there's some inheritance here, and who's doing that work? Okay, it's these folks here. So that's inheritance. Last thing I want to say about inheritance here is you'll see I use statements like, please see company shared responsibility matrix for additional details. Or Prevail, that's a software, a SaaS product. Please see the Prevail SRM for additional details. Okay. From my experience, I hope you guys are kind of familiar with SRM, CRM, but those are documents that define how your external service provider is implementing the requirements. So in that document, it should provide detail on how those requirements are being implemented by whatever services or tools they're providing. So there's detail in there. And it goes back to that one source of truth. I would refrain from, repeating that detail in here, because if your external service provider changes something, for example, let's talk about vulnerability scanning. If I have an external service provider who's doing vulnerability scanning for me, and they're using a tool called Nessus, and they're doing my vulnerability scanning every 2 weeks. Well, if I put that level of detail in here and I said the external service provider is using Nessus and they're doing vulnerability scanning every 2 weeks, and if for whatever reason they change it and they go from 2 weeks to 1 week with your authorization, of course, or they change the tool, then that could mean that you have to go into your system and change that. So let them do all the documentation work on their end and maintain that documentation on their end, and just refer to that document. And that document is going to be in FutureFeed anyway. It is going to be found in here. So under documents, under reference documents, CRMs is where you would get that external service provider's SRM or CRM, and you'd upload it into FutureFeed. So that level of detail an assessor is going to want to see is going to be in here, but just don't repeat it under the controls, because if there's a change, you could end up with some combating information. Is that a right way to say that? Go ahead, Russell. Got a question?
Yeah, is there some place where I can get guidance on what should be in the shared responsibility matrix?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the shared responsibility matrix I got from my managed service provider doesn't give anything. It just says what they're responsible for, what we're responsible for, with no details.
Oh, okay. Sometimes they don't put the detail in their SRM or their SRM, CRM, whatever they're calling it. But a SRM and a CRM typically is backed by a system security plan. So they may have a system security plan that provides more detail. I'm just saying, there's really no defined level of detail, except you do need them to give you some sort of document that does define how that requirement is being addressed. Not simply a inherited or partially inherited, and that's it. They have to provide they have to state how that requirement is being addressed. And so
So-
whether that's in the SRM or the CRM, or maybe they have a system security plan that goes into more detail, that's fine as well from an assessor's perspective.
Okay, so I might be able to get the system security plan from them.
Yeah,
They haven't
depending
offered
who
that
it
at this
is.
point.
Yeah, is it a cloud provider?
No.
Oh, okay. But what I can give you is our shared responsibility matrix. You guys have every right to see that anyway, as users of FutureFeed. And it's it's a good SRM, CRM to mimic if you wanna look at that as far as the level of detail.
Thank you much.
You're welcome. Actually, I kind of chuckled because I just had a meeting before this and I have just from today alone, I think I have like 10 people that I gotta send this, the FutureFeed SRM to. So let me, shoot, where did I write that down? Okay, let me just write your name down. So that way I don't forget. I haven't found out how to recover the chat or the logs from the Zoom messages yet. So if I close out of the meeting, I might lose your name. All right. So I think we pretty much covered this area, okay? So again, just to recap, when you first get access to FutureFeed, all this is going to be blank. So you're going to have to work on filling it all out. But then once you've filled it out, what happens is when you do your annual security control assessment, it's going to be a lot quicker because you'll come in here, you'll look at the control, you'll read what your company says, how it's been implemented. You're going to know exactly who to talk to because you've identified them down here. You're going to know exactly what evidence to regenerate or go and collect. Like if you have an access control policy and you're doing an annual security control assessment, you're going to want to go get the newest version of the access control policy. So your internal annual assessments should be quicker once you have this information filled all out. It's essentially like your playbook to doing that assessment. So make sure you address the objectives, provide statements, identify if there's inheritance, and if it's not met, modify that POA&M, get people working on remediating that issue. If you do say something is met, get evidence, and then make sure that evidence is found down below. So the other sections under the control is interview, of course. So this is where you're identifying everybody with some responsibility in your company. These are the people you would interview internally to validate if a requirement is implemented, during your internal assessment activity. And it's the people who are going to be interviewed during an external assessment. Examine, this is all your evidence, your documentation evidence. So a rule of thumb up here in the statement sections and here and the assessment statements. If you mention a document, a process, a procedure, a plan, a form, a worksheet, okay, make sure you get that documentation and you upload it into FutureFeed under the documents section, and then you connect it to the control and it will show up here under examine. Same thing for test. If in your implementation statements, you mention some sort of tool that's being used to implement the requirements, make sure you create a listing for that tool under the technologies or tools area, connect it to this control, and it will be found down here. This is also the time where if you've established some connections that don't make sense, then remove them. Make sure you only have connected the evidence and the tools that directly relate to that control requirement. You don't want to have a bunch of stuff connected here that doesn't even relate to the requirement, because then it's just going to confuse your assessors, external assessors, and when you're doing your internal assessment, it's going to be muddy, and you may start looking into things that you don't have to look into. Under each control, we also have the potential assessment considerations. So if you are doing that internal assessment and you get a little stuck, you don't know what to ask people, here's some questions to get you started. And they're fillable, so you can click on them. Here, you would ask this question to whoever's responsible. If you say yes, why did we say yes? How is it implemented? If you say no, why'd you say no? What's wrong? What's the issue? What needs to be done? And when you say no, and you hit submit, you're building out your system POA&M, or not your system POA&M, the POA&M entry for this requirement. And then the last section is additional evidence. So here's where you could upload some additional evidence, but not too many people use this. And it's because a lot of people choose to associate, instead of uploading the evidence here, they actually upload it to the tools items or the document items. So in the tools and documents, in these inventory items, there's a section here for evidence. All of them have an evidence tab. And so a lot of people choose to upload their evidence here. And let me show you kind of an example. It's always better for me if I use this as an example. I think I explain it a lot better. Let me go to, so here, an acceptable use policy. I have this entry for an acceptable use policy. And in here, there's a bunch of statements in these. I don't know if you're familiar with acceptable use policies. Sometimes they're referred to as rules of behavior, but they're documents that your employees read and sign, and their purpose is to teach your employees what's expected of them with regards to like rules of behavior or acceptable use. So how they should be using their computers and how they should be handling CUI data. So statements like don't share your password, and sometimes people don't allow printing, so you're not allowed to print any CUI data, or you're not allowed to bring CUI data home. When you're done with CUI data at the end of the day, lock it up in this cabinet. So that's statements, and typically those statements are addressing 10 or 15 more different security control requirements. And so in the connect area, oh, great, somebody already did it. So in this one, we have, at least 9, I guess there's 13 more. There's a bunch of security controls that are related to this acceptable use policy. Well, an assessor is going to want to see that you guys are actually making your employees, or your users sign this acceptable use policy. So they're going to want to see evidence of an acceptable use policy that's been signed. And you could go under all 13 or more of these controls, and you could go under all of these controls and way down under the evidence area, upload that signed AUP. But if you did that, you'd have to upload it 13 or more times under each control, versus if you upload it here under this evidence section, you only have to upload it once. And now that evidence is associated with the policy, and it's associated with all these controls. So now if I'm an assessor and I'm looking at this control and it says something like, we have our employees sign and agree to follow the rules of behavior or the acceptable use policy, I would scroll down, I'd look, okay, there's your acceptable use policy, I'd open it up, and then over here in my evidence, I'd see evidence that that AUP, that acceptable use policy, is being utilized and enforced, okay? So it depends on the evidence we're talking about. In some cases, it makes sense to upload it down below in the additional artifacts area, but always try to upload the evidence and associate it with whatever document was requiring you to produce that evidence. Okay, so like a risk acceptance, not a risk assessment procedure here, this risk assessment procedure. This is probably where you would upload your risk assessment reports. You followed this risk assessment procedure, which produced a risk assessment report, and so you'd put that evidence here. And now every control connected to this risk assessment procedure will be able to find that evidence. Am I making sense?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So that's all the areas of a control. You got those 6 areas. Just to quickly recap, we went through them all. You have an area to document status, implementation narrative, inheritance, identify who's responsible and who needs to be interviewed, documentation evidence, your tools that you're using to implement or enforce that requirement, some questions that will help you lead your internal assessments, and a place to upload additional evidence. Also in the control, just to highlight, we have, you can see the weight of the different requirements. We have an area here called guidance, which has some additional information about that requirement and how that requirement is related to CMMC, some examples, and some external references. That's the guidance book. Of course, you can watch some videos here that someone put together. If you click on these videos, it's going to bring you to a website. You do have to log in, and it's a free account. So you do have to create an account because those videos are hosted on a different platform. But it's free, and we're partners with this company. So just make an account and you could watch those. All right, the last thing I want to cover in here is this copy control, and I'm going to just briefly talk about it because some people don't even need to know about it, but what it is a place for you to, like, right now I'm under the 318 control. If I took a long time to like type up this narrative and connect the documents and the tools and identify the people, and I wanted to send that information over to another control to quickly populate and fill out that other control, that's what this is. So you can select controls, hold on, manually. So we have made some recommendations in here. So we're saying for 318, you might want to send at least the people you've identified as being responsible in the RACI area. See how it's checked? Typically those people are also the same people that have responsibility for these controls. Look at them. They're very technical controls. So we're in a very technical control. So you got to think about the people responsible. It's usually your system administrators, the IT department. And so these other ones here are also very technical controls. And typically it's the same tool that's implementing it, Entra ID or a policy or some configuration setting. And so you can quickly identify those people as being responsible under the RACI area by these are our recommendations, and hitting copy. Am I making sense? I don't even know if I am, but
Yeah.
Okay. And so here we're just saying the interview. Uh, Summary notes, you can send it over there, but you got to remember in this one under 318, we're talking about limit of logon attempts, and under this one, we're going to talk about authorizing access to users. And so copying the summary notes over there doesn't make sense. You can use our recommendations, or if you go down below, you can do the manual selection and you can navigate to the controls and select whatever ones you'd like to. So that's the copy control area. Okay, so we pretty much covered all of assess. After you get through tools, documents, and assess, and you get over into your system security plan, your system security plan should be pretty filled out. So what this is, it's a nice browser representation of your SSP for the purpose of conducting a review of your system security plan and quickly editing information that may be wrong. So here you're just navigating through the different sections of your SSP, and if you find that some information is inaccurate, okay, my system unique identifier, okay, that's inaccurate, I can just click the edit button. It will bring me back to that section so I can edit that information. And now if I go back to my SSP, it's accurate. So you want to do your reviewing and editing of your system security plan in the browser section, because it's just going to make it that, quick. You're going to be able to review it and edit quickly. Versus if you go under deliverables, under SSP, you can download a SSP report. It's going to be in like a Word document, and you can review it that way. It's just then you're back to old school, like highlighting where something's wrong, and then you'd have to log back into FutureFeed and make that update. So however you want to do it. This SSP area, so it's meant to review. Here we got a little reviewed, not reviewed flag, and it tracks history. Let me click it a few more times. It tracks no history. It's not working. There should be a longer history log there. Let's see.
There's a little delay on when it updates.
Okay.
I like just earlier today I went through and marked a whole ton of stuff is not met to generate POA&Ms for stuff
Okay.
because they had useful information on how to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and since we have a lot of people that aren't CMMC nerds working on this, it's always good to give them as much information as possible. But anyway, see, I noticed that I can sometimes get 2 or 3 controls ahead of the system updating the control to turn it red.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I gotta practice patience in my daily life, especially when it comes to technology. But I'll follow up on that, and if it's not working, I'll submit a ticket. By the way, if you guys ever need to submit a ticket, you can email us at support@futurefeed.co, or if you go up into user settings, help center, it brings you to our help center. You do have to log in here sometimes too, especially you get access to the full gambit of FutureFeed articles and how-tos and videos. You'll want to log in, and you do have to create an account. It's free, of course, but just sign in. But if you want to submit a ticket, then hit new feature requests and you can submit a ticket this way.
That little green chat bot thing is actually pretty good too.
This is,
Down in the bottom corner is what I'm talking about.
oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, yep. Okay. So I don't think there's much to cover here other than you're reviewing your SSP. And to reset all of the flags, click on this little gear icon. So whenever you move into an official system security plan review cycle, definitely before your C3PAO assessment, you're going to want to review your SSP. Some people also do like an annual review of their system security plan. So whenever you want to reset all of the flags, so they're all blank, you just hit here, reset SSP flags. Now everything is not reviewed, and now you can go through the different sections. Well, see, it's not taking. we'll have to submit a ticket for that. There's a few little bugs here and there that since we updated the interface, we got to work out some kinks. But our dev team is really quick on fixing stuff like this. All right, after you review the SSP, over here under your FutureFeed, this is your POAM. So you'll probably be frequently visiting this area, especially if you have a lot of controls that have failed. This is where you're going to be managing your compliance and getting things implemented and remediated. So in here, this first page, it lists all of your system POAMs. Sometimes if you have a filter from a previous like you were logged in previously and you filtered, you might need to clear that filter out because they do stay put. But here's all my pending POAM items. Here's all my in progress and my completed POAM items. If I want to, what we've implemented is this project builder, okay? Because right now I have 102 items, POAM items. That's a lot of line items to go through and kind of track and and check in on and make sure people are doing the work, right? So the project builder was implemented for the purpose of you would group like issues or you'd group like non-compliance, turn them into a project, get that one project assigned to someone, and now instead of having to check in and update 102 different items, maybe now you just have 20 different projects to kind of manage. So it's as simple as, clicking on the ones that you want to include in a project, hit add project. Here's all my pre-existing projects if I want to add them to it, or I can create a new one. Okay. Hit add to project. And you can, over here under proposed projects, if you filter anything with a plus sign, which it doesn't look like we even have any in here. Oh, one right there. So anything with a plus sign is not part of a project. So this is a diagram, that's documentation. I might want to add that to my documentation project, if the same person is doing the work. And then to view all your projects, over here is your project portfolio. Here's all my projects. And now instead of, managing 102 different line items, I just got to come in here, click on my project, check in with the person responsible for doing that work, maybe upload some project documentations or notes, and then here's all the individual items that are part of that one project. Okay, any questions about POAM? The last thing we have to cover is deliverables. So this presentation builder is awesome, especially if you're doing client consulting, and you have or even managing compliance. I'm sure you have to check in with management every once in a while, or maybe brief your CEO on how's your assessment going or what's the status of your SSP. So what this is, it's a way to quickly build presentations or reports using the information from FutureFeed. So it's only going to be as accurate as the information you have in FutureFeed. And what you do is on the setup is where you would put your presenter name, maybe, executive summary, what's that report about, what's that presentation about. And then in the cyber readiness builder, you just select what you want to be part of that report. So let's say I'm meeting with, let's do that documentation project. Let's say I'm meeting with my tech writer and I have to present them this project and get them started on it. So I might want to definitely leave my welcome statement. They don't need to see anything about my SSP or my assessment. I go down and I find my documentation project. Okay, there it is. Looks like I've used this example previously. Okay, and then I just hit play or download. You can download a report, then it looks more like an official report. If you hit play, it looks more like a PowerPoint presentation. But you can present directly from FutureFeed, so that way if they have questions and maybe this information isn't in here, you can close out and go to that section of FutureFeed. But here I'm showing them my welcome area, and if I go over, here's that documentation project, and if I scroll down, all of this information is blank, but you know, it's pulling from the fields of that project, so you'd want to fill them out. Here's all the items that are part of that one project and all the completed. So you can present information, or you quickly create presentations and reports from the information in FutureFeed. And then we have an area where you can export your system POA&M. So this POA&M actions, this is a complete listing of all. So I have 102 POA&M items. This would be a listing of all 102. Or I can export a listing of my projects. Here's where you would export your system security plan. That's your SSP report. Just click the download. A thing here is that after you download, like let's say I just downloaded this one, someone did. A lot of people are in this environment too, which is maybe why it's a little glitchy, because this sample environment is, we give access, there's hundreds of accounts in here. People are in here every day. So, but when you download an SSP report, if I were to click download, it would take a minute because there's a lot of fake data in here. So I'm not going to do that, but that's how you generate a current SSP. And it archives it, as you see here. And you can go in here, and if you click on the pencil, you can put, if you want to version that SSP, you can, you know, make some version notes. And if you got that SSP approved, you can mark it approved and who approved it. Okay, just a couple different fields you can track. It's in the history section is where you would track that. SPRS submission. So when you have to do your annual attestation in SPRS, or maybe you just have to go update your score in SPRS. If you've ever done that, when you log your score in SPRS or the PIEE system, they ask a few things. They want to know the version of your system security plan. They want your system security plan title. They want to know your score, and they want to know the last due date of all your POA&M items, and probably a couple other things, maybe your cage code and stuff. So here, what you're doing for a SPRS submission, you'd come into FutureFeed, you'd take a snapshot of your system security plan, which is essentially generating a system security plan and archiving it. It would be archived down here. And now you have saved a version of your system security plan that aligns with that score you've uploaded into SPRS. So if you ever get audited and they want to say, hey, you know, on May 8th, you said your score was -35. Please show me that system security plan that aligns with that -35 score. You would have it down here under the archive section. So whenever you're doing SPRS submissions, you'll want to come in here and take a snapshot. All right, the last thing here is the exports. So any of the files that you put into FutureFeed, documents, screenshots, evidence, you can export them. And then any of the data that you put into FutureFeed, you could also export. So you would definitely use this area here, these two exports. You would use them for when you go into that C3PAO assessment. The very first thing they're going to want is they're going to say, hey, give me your system security plan and all your evidence. They want all your security documents, your plans, policies, procedures, all the screenshots, all that evidence. So you would export it here and then send it to the C3PAO. All right, any questions? Anything you want me to kind of revisit, go back over?
No, thank you. I'll look at the video for the first 10 minutes that I missed.
Okay. One thing I'm gonna point out to you guys, if you log into FutureFeed, you go to the bottom. This 15 minutes with FutureFeed session, if you're not already signed up. Well, to save myself, I've been talking a lot. Are both of you signed up for this at all?
Not currently.
No.
Okay. Okay. So what it is, it's actually 30-minute meeting. But somebody a long time before I've only been with the company for 5 months. So somebody before my time called it 15 minutes with FutureFeed, but I changed it to 30 minutes. It's 30 minutes every week with me, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And it's like open office hours. It's meant for a place for you to join. So I would register, you just have to register once, and then it's a reoccurring meeting. So you can join whatever week you have questions. Maybe you're stuck on something with FutureFeed and you need some guidance. But often we get into talking about the requirements and what they mean and the different CMMC regulations. So I try to address like FutureFeed related questions first, but then really it's just I love this meeting. It's every Thursday and it's 40 to 50 people join and we're just talking CMMC and FutureFeed. So if you instead of like submitting a ticket and waiting for a response, if it's something that can wait to Thursday, feel free to join that meeting and then ask me and I can help you with FutureFeed. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Will do.
Well, thank you guys for your time this afternoon. I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting and reach out if you need any more training or if you have questions.
Sure thing.
Okay, bye.
Bye.